My daughter-in-law thought I was fast asleep after the sleeping pill she slipped into my dinner. She quietly entered the room and opened the safe. When she looked inside, she froze. Her eyes widened in shock. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The china plates felt heavier than usual as I arranged them on the dining table. 64 years on this earth, and suddenly my own hands seemed unfamiliar, like I was playing a role in someone else's house. I stepped back to survey the table. White linen, polished silverware, the good crystal glasses reserved for occasions. Everything looked right, but nothing felt right anymore. The living room behind me had changed in ways I couldn't quite articulate. My favorite reading chair, the leather wingback that had occupied the spot by the window for 15 years, now sat awkwardly in the corner near the bookshelf. Family photos on the mantel had been rearranged. My granddaughter's graduation picture, which I'd kept front and center, was now third in line behind two photos of Myrtle and Alfred at some charity gala I didn't remember attending. "Let me help you with that, Ward. You shouldn't be doing all this work alone." I turned to find Myrtle standing in the dining room doorway. Her smile was bright, practiced, the kind salespeople use when they're working on commission. She wore a burgundy dress I hadn't seen before, and her dark hair was pulled back in a way that made her look softer than usual. "I'm fine, Myrtle. I've been setting tables for 40 years. I kept my voice level, neutral, no need to show the knot forming in my stomach. She moved into the kitchen anyway, pulling serving dishes from the cabinet with the efficiency of someone who'd mapped the territory. Strange, considering she usually spent dinner preparations upstairs on her phone, leaving me to manage everything alone. This sudden helpfulness felt like a performance, though I couldn't say for whom. I adjusted a fork that didn't need adjusting and tried to remember when exactly things had started shifting. Was it 9 months ago? A year? The timeline blurred when I tried to pin it down. Small changes at first, Alfred canceling our Sunday basketball games, then forgetting to call me back. Friends from the church social club, I'd stopped attending religious services years ago, but kept the friendships, started leaving me out of their poker nights. When I asked Henry about it, he'd seemed uncomfortable, mentioning something about Myrtle saying I was going through a rough patch and needed space. The front door opened. Alfred walked in, tie loosened, briefcase in hand. He glanced at me with a brief nod, acknowledgement without warmth, before crossing to Myrtle and kissing her cheek. "How was work?" she asked, touching his arm with proprietary tenderness. "Long. Is everything ready for tonight?" "Almost. Your father's been helpful." The way she said helpful carried a subtle emphasis, as if my competence was surprising. Alfred checked his phone, thumbs moving across the screen. "Good. What time are your parents getting here?" 7. We have 20 minutes. He nodded without looking up. My son, my only child, stood 15 feet away and couldn't spare me eye contact. I turned back to the table, straightening a napkin that was already perfectly aligned. The distance between us hadn't always existed. I'd taught Alfred to ride a bike, helped him with calculus homework, drove him to college visits. We'd rebuilt a '67 Mustang together in the garage, spending Saturdays covered in grease and arguing about proper torque specifications. That car sat in the driveway now, untouched for 2 years. Alfred said he was too busy to work on it anymore. I walked to the basement stairs, descended into the cooler air of my wine cellar. The familiar scent of oak and concrete steadied me. I selected a Cabernet from 2019, a good year, nothing too flashy, and paused before heading back up. The small mirror near the basement door reflected a face I barely recognized. When had those shadows appeared under my eyes? The gauntness in my cheeks? The doorbell rang as I emerged. Through the window, I saw Olive and Herbert Stone standing on the porch, Olive holding a covered dish, Herbert in a sport coat despite the September heat. I opened the door, and Olive's face lit up. "Ward, happy birthday to my wonderful son-in-law's father." She'd never quite figured out the right title, but her warmth was genuine. Herbert extended his hand, his grip firm and sure. "Good to see you, Ward. Thanks for having us." "Come in, please. We're glad you could make it." They were good people, the Stones. Herbert had worked construction for 35 years before retiring, and Olive volunteered at the library. They'd raised Myrtle in Clearwater, in a modest house where neighbors knew each other's names. How they'd produce someone like Myrtle remained a mystery I hadn't solved. "What a lovely home you have, Ward. You must be so proud of everything you've built." Olive's eyes swept the living room with genuine admiration. My chest tightened. Yes, I was proud. I'd bought this house in 1998, back when Tampa real estate was reasonable. I'd replaced the roof, renovated the kitchen, planted the oak tree in the backyard that now provided shade for half the yard. This was my home, mine. So, why did it increasingly feel like I was a guest here, tolerated but not truly welcome? Thank you, Olive. Let me take that dish. We moved toward the dining room. Myrtle appeared from the kitchen, embracing her mother, kissing her father's cheek. Happy birthday, Daddy. 68 looks good on you. Alfred emerged from wherever he'd disappeared to, shaking Herbert's hand, complimenting Olive's dress. We all took our seats, Myrtle and Alfred on one side, Olive and Herbert on the other, me at the head of the table where I'd sat for 27 years. I watched Alfred defer to Myrtle about which dishes to serve first. I watched Myrtle guide the conversation toward Herbert's recent fishing trip, her mother's volunteer work, Alfred's latest project at the engineering firm. I watched myself become invisible in my own dining room. The food came out, roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, and I realized I couldn't remember who'd actually cooked it. Had I? Had Myrtle? The preparation had happened in some fog I couldn't quite penetrate. Dad, Myrtle told me you forgot to pay the utilities last month. We can't have that happening again. Alfred's voice was matter of fact, almost bored, as he reached for the potatoes. The statement hung in the air like an accusation. Olive and Herbert continued eating, apparently not registering the tension. I paid them on time, the same day I always do. I kept my voice steady, stating simple fact. Alfred shrugged, the gesture dismissive. Well, we got a disconnect notice, so something went wrong. Something went wrong. As if I'd become unreliable, forgetful, incompetent. As if my 43 years of paying bills on time had suddenly evaporated into senile confusion. I picked up my wine glass and took a careful sip, buying time to swallow the anger rising in my throat. Across the table, Myrtle watched me with an expression I couldn't quite decode. Was it concern or something else? Something colder? The conversation moved on. Herbert told a joke about his fishing buddy. Olive asked about the neighbors. Alfred checked his phone again. And I sat at the head of my own table, feeling like a ghost at someone else's dinner party. Herbert launched into a story about his fishing trip to Lake Okeechobee, something involving a snapped line and a base that got away. Everyone's attention shifted toward him, even Alfred looking up from his phone. The perfect moment for someone to act unnoticed. I reached for my water glass, but Myrtle's hand moved with surprising speed, sliding the orange juice closer to me instead. Ward, you've barely touched your juice. You need to stay hydrated. Drink up. Her voice carried that same artificial sweetness from earlier. I looked down at the glass, pulpy orange liquid catching the chandelier light, and something in my gut twisted. I'll drink it in a moment. Let me enjoy Herbert's story first. Dad, listen to Myrtle. She's right about you needing to drink more water, or juice. Alfred's automatic support came without him even turning his head fully toward me. I picked up my fork instead, spearing a green bean I had no appetite for. But I didn't eat it. I held it suspended above my plate while keeping my eyes on Herbert, who was demonstrating the angle of his fishing rod with animated gestures. Meanwhile, my peripheral vision stayed locked on Myrtle. She shifted in her seat. Her right hand dropped below the table edge, disappearing into her lap. My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my face neutral, slightly bored if anything. An old man only half listening to fishing stories he'd heard variations of 100 times. Herbert's voice filled the room. So I'm reeling, and suddenly, wham, the line goes completely slack. Olive gasped on cue. Alfred mumbled something about bad luck, and in that moment of collective distraction, I saw it. Myrtle's hand emerged from her lap, holding something small, maybe the size of a sugar packet. Her movements were swift, practiced, the hand sweeping over my juice glass, a quick shake of white powder hitting the liquid, her index finger stirring once, twice, so fast I might have missed it if I'd blinked. Then her hand was back in her lap, empty, and she was laughing at something Herbert said about losing his lucky lure. My fingers tightened on the napkin in my lap, the cloth bunched in my fist, but my face remained calm. I couldn't afford to react, not yet. How many times had this happened before? The thought crashed through my mind like breaking glass. How many dinners had I sat through, drinking whatever she offered, waking up the next morning groggy and disoriented, blaming it on age. Those mornings when I couldn't remember driving home from the grocery store. The afternoon I'd found myself in the garage with no memory of walking there. The night I'd woken up at 3 a.m. in my reading chair, fully dressed, with hours missing from my memory. Not age, not decline, poison. The word felt melodramatic even as it formed in my thoughts, but what else could it be? Myrtle had just put something in my drink, something she didn't want anyone, especially me, to know about. "Oh, Myrtle, you take such good care of everyone. Ward is lucky to have you in the family." Olive beamed at her daughter with motherly pride. The irony made my stomach turn. I set down my fork carefully, precisely, in exactly the right position on my plate. "I think I'll get some dessert started," Myrtle announced, standing gracefully. "Ward, would you mind bringing out the extra napkins? They're in the kitchen drawer." She wanted me away from the table, away from the glass. Or maybe she wanted to dispose of evidence. That small packet had to go somewhere. I counted to 10 in my head, letting her get a comfortable distance ahead. Then I pushed back my chair. "Of course, I'll just be a moment." The kitchen was separated from the dining room by a partial wall and a wide doorway. I could see Myrtle at the counter, her back to me, reaching into the trash can. Her shoulders had a tension I recognized, the posture of someone completing a task they desperately wanted finished. I moved quietly for a man my age, my footsteps muffled by the rubber soles I'd started wearing after my hip replacement 3 years ago. From my angle, I watched her push something deep into the trash, her fingers working it underneath coffee grounds and what looked like vegetable peelings from dinner prep. She pressed down firmly, ensuring it was buried, then stepped back and exhaled, a small breath of relief. I opened the napkin drawer with deliberate noise. The wooden slide mechanism announced my presence. Myrtle spun around, her expression smooth and innocent within half a second. "Oh good, you found them. We're running low out there with 5 people." "No problem." I collected the cloth napkins, white with blue embroidered edges, part of a set my late wife had loved, and stacked them neatly in my palm. My movements were slow, methodical, the movements of an old man whose reflexes had dulled, whose sharpness had faded. Let her think that. Let her believe her performance was working. I walked back to the dining room, distributed napkins to everyone who didn't really need one, and settled back into my seat. The orange juice sat there, innocent-looking, deadly. My mouth had gone dry, but I wouldn't touch that glass for anything. Herbert had moved on to a different story now, something about his granddaughter's soccer tournament. Myrtle rejoined us, sitting down with a satisfied smile, reaching for her wine. She glanced at my juice glass, and I caught the flicker of annoyance when she saw it still full. But she couldn't push too hard, not with her parents here, not without raising suspicions. I picked up my water glass instead, took a long drink, and watched her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Inside, my mind raced through questions at a speed that contradicted my calm exterior. How long had she been doing this? Weeks? Months? What was the substance? Sedatives? Something stronger? And more importantly, why? What did she gain from drugging me? The answer came with cold clarity, credibility. Every foggy morning, every forgotten conversation, every missed appointment built the case that Ward Ferguson was declining, losing it, no longer capable of managing his own affairs. And Alfred, my own son, had already accepted that narrative, already started treating me like a burden that needed managing rather than a father who deserved respect. I set down my water glass with a hand that didn't shake, though everything inside me wanted to overturn the table and demand answers. But that would accomplish nothing. Rage without strategy was just noise. "Ward, you look tired. Maybe you should turn in early after dinner." Myrtle's voice dripped with false concern. "I'm fine." 2 words, simple, final. Across the table, Herbert raised his wine glass. "Well, before we dig into whatever dessert Myrtle's prepared, I want to say thank you for hosting. Good food, good company, that's what birthdays are about." We all raised our glasses. All except me. I raised my water glass instead, and saw Myrtle's eyes narrow just slightly before she plastered on another smile. The evening continued around me while I sat at the head of my table, looking like a docile old man enjoying family time, but inside, behind my carefully neutral expression, I was counting, calculating, planning. I'd caught her this time, by accident, by luck, by the simple act of watching at exactly the right moment, which meant she'd gotten away with it before, multiple times, maybe dozens. The glass of poison juice sat 3 inches from my right hand, a loaded weapon disguised as hospitality. I wouldn't drink it, but I wouldn't throw it away either. Evidence had a way of becoming useful when you needed it most. Olive launched into an enthusiastic description of their bathroom renovation. We went with subway tiles for the shower. Classic, you know. But Herbert wanted this ridiculous rainfall shower head that cost more than our first television. Herbert laughed, picking up the thread. It says the woman who insisted on heated floors in Florida, where it's 70 degrees in January. The table responded with polite chuckles. I watched the dynamics, the easy flow of their banter, and felt the weight of what I was about to do settle into my bones like lead. My hand moved to my glass. The orange juice caught the light, looking perfectly ordinary, perfectly deadly. I lifted it slowly, drawing every eye to the gesture. I'd like to propose a toast to Herbert, who... I stopped, let my face go slack, stared at the glass as if I'd forgotten why I was holding it. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Alfred, could you grab that envelope from the side table? The blue one. My thoughts are scattered today. My son stood immediately, chair scraping against hardwood. Sure, Dad. Living room? Yes. Next to the lamp. Myrtle's eyes tracked Alfred as he left the dining room, her attention for once diverted from me. Herbert filled the gap without missing a beat. Oh, don't worry about the toast, Ward. Birthdays at my age are just counting exercises anyway. He picked up where Olive had left off, describing how the contractor had installed the shower valve backwards and they'd discovered it only after the tile work was finished. 15 seconds. Maybe less. My right hand stayed visible on the glass stem. My left hand moved beneath the table edge, silent and sure. 40 years arranging furniture in retail showrooms had taught me precision, how to shift a 300-pound armoire an inch to the left without scratching floors, how to make adjustments so subtle customers never noticed the change. This was just another adjustment. I leaned forward slightly as if invested in Herbert's story. My poison glass slid right. Olive's identical glass, same style, same fill level, same pulpy orange liquid, slid left. The swap took 4 seconds. The glasses settled into their new positions with barely a whisper of crystal on linen. Herbert concluded his story. So now we have a shower that runs backwards. Hot is cold, cold is hot. Olive's gotten used to it, but every guest we have ends up yelping. Alfred returned, envelope in hand, slightly out of breath, as if he'd hurried. Found it. Thank you. I took the envelope, set it beside Herbert's plate, and raised the glass again. Olive's glass, clean and innocent. To Herbert, may this year bring you everything you've worked for. Everyone lifted their drinks. I brought the glass to my lips, let the juice barely wet them, swallowed nothing. Across the table, Myrtle watched with hawk's intensity. When I lowered the glass, having drunk from it, satisfaction bloomed across her features like a poisonous flower. Herbert accepted the gift certificate with genuine pleasure. Olive complimented my thoughtfulness. Alfred checked his phone again, and Olive, thirsty from her animated descriptions of tile patterns and heated floors, lifted her glass casually. She drank while nodding at something Herbert said about their next project. 3 long swallows. Half the glass disappeared, my hands folded in my lap, fingers lacing together to stop their trembling. What I'd done was necessary, essential. The only way to prove Myrtle's crime was to let her believe it had succeeded while documenting its effects on someone else. But Olive, kind, warm, innocent Olive, had just consumed whatever sedative Myrtle had meant for me. And I'd put it there. I'd moved that glass with my own hands. The guilt began its work immediately, crawling up from my stomach into my chest, making it hard to breathe normally. Lovely toast, Ward. Now drink up. You barely touched your juice. Myrtle's voice carried that same false sweetness, but underneath it ran a current of triumph. I raised the glass again, took a slightly larger sip this time. Let her think I was cooperating. Let her believe her plan was unfolding perfectly. Herbert launched into another story, this one about their grandson's baseball team. Olive contributed details, her voice animated, completely unaware of what was happening inside her body, the sedative spreading through her bloodstream, molecules finding receptors, chemistry becoming effect. I picked at my dessert when Myrtle brought it out. Store-bought vanilla cake with buttercream frosting, The sweetness turned to ash on my tongue. Across the table, Olive laughed at something Alfred said. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed with wine and conversation. She looked happy, healthy, safe, for now. I glanced at my watch. 7:12. The switch had happened at approximately 7:05. If the substance was a typical sedative, effects would begin manifesting in 20 to 30 minutes, which meant I had perhaps 25 minutes before I'd see the consequences of what I'd done. 25 minutes to prepare myself for Olive's confusion, her fear, her body's betrayal. 25 minutes to become the kind of man who could watch an innocent woman suffer and not break. I took another bite of cake I couldn't taste and waited for the poison to work. The cake plates made soft sounds against the table as we ate. Conversation drifted from Herbert's baseball story to local politics to Alfred's upcoming business trip. Normal dinner talk. Ordinary rhythms. I tracked time with obsessive precision. 7:15, 7:20, 7:25. At 7:28, Olive yawned. A small thing, barely noticeable. She covered her mouth politely and continued listening to Alfred describe some engineering problem at work. At 7:32, she yawned again. This one lasted longer, her jaw stretching wide, eyes squeezing shut. When they opened, they had a glazed quality that hadn't been there before. "Excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with me tonight." Herbert glanced at his wife with mild concern. "You feeling all right?" "Just tired. Must have overdone it with the weeding yesterday. Those tomato plants needed serious attention." She reached for her water glass, and I watched her movements slow, as if she was moving through something thicker than air. At 7:35, mid-sentence about her garden's yield, Olive's words began running together. "The beefsteaks came in beautiful this year, really spectacular, and the cherry tomatoes are—" She stopped, blinked hard, shook her head like she was trying to clear fog. "Sorry, lost my thought." "You were talking about tomatoes," Herbert prompted, but his jovial tone had tightened. "Right, tomatoes." She stared at her plate as if the word had become foreign. My chest constricted. There it was, the cognitive impairment, the way sedatives scrambled neural pathways and made simple thoughts feel like complex equations. I'd researched this years ago when my late wife had needed sleep medication after her surgery. I knew the signs. Olive lifted her fork to take another bite of cake. Her hand trembled. The fork moved in slow motion, found her mouth through what seemed like considerable concentration. When she set it down, it clattered against the plate, her fine motor control degrading. "Mom, you sure you're okay?" Even Alfred noticed now, looking up from his phone with belated attention. "I'm fine, honey. Just exhausted. Been a long week." But her voice had lost its crisp edges. The consonants blurred, syllables sliding into each other. Herbert's hand moved to her shoulder, and I watched his expression shift from concern to alarm. He'd been married to this woman for 43 years. He knew when something was seriously wrong. I manufactured my own performance. A wide yawn, complete with sound effects. I pressed my fingers to my temples and let my shoulders slump. "Heavy day, I guess. Age catches up with all of us." Myrtle's gaze snapped to me. Her eyes moved over my face, checking for symptoms, and when she saw my theatrical fatigue, her lips curved upward. The smile was tiny, barely a millimeter of movement, but it was there. Satisfaction. Victory. She stood to clear plates, moving with unusual energy. She even hummed softly as she worked, a tuneless sound that made my jaw ache from clenching. "Ward, maybe you should head to bed early," she suggested, voice dripping with false concern. "You look exhausted." "Might do that." I rubbed my eyes for effect. Olive tried to stand and swayed. Herbert's arm shot out, catching her elbow. "Honey, sit down." "No, I want to go home. I'll be fine once I'm in my own bed." The stubborn pride in her voice was heartbreaking. She knew something was wrong, but couldn't identify what. So she retreated to familiar territory. Home, bed, safety. "Maybe you should rest in our guest room," Myrtle offered, but her tone was perfunctory. She wanted them gone, wanted to focus on me, to see if her sedative had done its job. "No, thank you. Herbert, let's go." Olive pushed herself up from the chair with Herbert's help. Her legs wobbled. Her pupils were dilated, dark moons and hazel irises. The movement to the front hallway happened in slow stages. Herbert gathered their things. Olive's purse, his jacket, car keys, while his wife leaned against the wall. She kept insisting she was fine, but her eyelids drooped like curtains falling on a finished performance. Alfred helped with their coats, making awkward small talk. Myrtle stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, watching me with barely concealed anticipation. I walked the stones to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Herbert had his arm around Olive's waist now, supporting most of her weight. "Thank you for dinner, Ward, and the gift certificate. Very thoughtful." Herbert's automatic politeness couldn't mask the worry in his eyes. His hand trembled against Olive's side. "Get home safe." The words felt like lies. Nothing about this was safe. Olive smiled at me, but her focus was off, eyes not quite meeting mine. "Such a nice evening, thank you." The words came out slowly, carefully, as if she was concentrating hard on each syllable. Herbert guided her down the porch steps. She stumbled once, and he caught her, his grip tightening. I stood in the doorway watching them make their slow progress to the car. Herbert opened the passenger door, helped Olive inside, fastened her seatbelt with the tenderness of a man caring for something precious. He looked back at me before getting in the driver's side. Our eyes met across the yard. In that moment, I saw his fear, naked and raw. His wife was sick, getting worse, and he didn't understand why. I nearly broke, nearly called out the truth, nearly confessed everything. But I didn't. I raised my hand in a wave. Herbert returned it with a tight nod and climbed into the car. The engine started. Headlights swept across my lawn. The car backed out of the driveway, turned, and rolled down the street. I watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Behind me, I heard Myrtle's footsteps approaching. The front door clicked shut. The house suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. I turned to face my daughter-in-law and son. Myrtle's eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. "You look terrible, Ward. You should really get some rest." Alfred glanced between us, oblivious as always. "Yeah, Dad, maybe lie down. We'll clean up." I manufactured another yawn, let my eyelids droop, became the man they expected to see, drugged, tired, declining. "Maybe you're right. I think I'll turn in." "Good idea." Myrtle's smile widened just slightly. She thought she'd won, thought her plan had worked perfectly, thought I was on my way to becoming the confused, incompetent old man she'd been building me into for months. I shuffled toward the stairs, playing the part, while my mind stayed razor-sharp behind the performance. Outside, somewhere in the Tampa night, Herbert was driving Olive home. She'd be struggling to stay awake, probably already asleep by the time they reached Clearwater. He'd help her inside, get her to bed, maybe call their doctor in the morning if she didn't improve. And I'd done that to them, put them through that fear and confusion because I needed proof. The guilt lived in my chest now, a permanent resident. But so did the certainty that I'd made the right choice. Sometimes justice required sacrifices, even if those sacrifices came from innocent people who deserve better. I climbed the stairs with exaggerated slowness, gripping the banister like a man who needed support. Behind me, I heard the television click on. Some crime show. The irony so sharp it almost made me laugh. "I'm heading to bed. Long day. Good night, you two." My voice carried the fatigue I'd been performing all evening, projected loud enough to reach wherever they had settled. "Night, Dad. Sleep well." Alfred's response came automatic and distant, already absorbed by whatever was on the screen. "Rest well, Ward. Sweet dreams." Myrtle's voice held something underneath the surface: satisfaction, anticipation. The tone of someone whose plan was unfolding exactly as designed. Sweet dreams. The phrase echoed in my head as I reached the top landing and turned toward my bedroom. Let's see whose dreams turn into nightmares tonight. My bedroom sat at the end of the hall, the master suite I'd occupied alone since my wife passed 7 years ago. I entered, closed the door with a soft click, and turned on the bedside lamp. The warm glow filled the space. Familiar furniture, familiar shadows. A room where I'd slept 10,000 nights, now transformed into a stage for the final act. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked my watch. 8:12. I needed to give this performance 10 minutes. Long enough for someone getting ready for bed, changing clothes, brushing teeth, the rituals of evening routine. But I didn't change, didn't brush my teeth. I sat fully dressed in the lamplight and waited, listening to the muffled sounds of the television filtering through the floor. A detective show, from what I could make out. Someone solving crimes while a real crime unfolded one floor below. At 8:22, I switched off the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. My eyes adjusted slowly, shapes emerging from shadows. The dresser against the far wall, the chair by the window, the door, a slightly lighter rectangle in the gloom. I moved to the dresser with steps I'd practiced earlier, knowing which floorboards creaked and avoiding them. The old wood had its own language. Speak to it wrong, and it would betray you. The top drawer slid open with barely a whisper. Inside, nested among socks and undershirts, lay the small key ring, 2 safe keys, several door keys, a file cabinet key, metal pieces that represented access, control, security, the things Myrtle wanted. I lifted them out and set them on the dresser top. Then I reached into my nightstand and withdrew the envelope I'd prepared during the previous week when my suspicions had crystallized into certainty. The surveillance camera had cost me $400 at an electronics store in Clearwater, small enough to hide in a bookshelf, motion-activated, infrared-capable. I'd installed it in my study after noticing too many small displacements. A folder moved, papers slightly out of order, my computer showing programs I hadn't opened. The camera had captured everything. Myrtle entering my study at 2 p.m. on August 30th while I was supposedly napping. Myrtle opening file cabinets, photographing documents with her phone, leaving everything almost, but not quite, exactly as she'd found it. I spread the printed photographs across the drawer's bottom, the clearest image on top, Myrtle's face caught in perfect infrared clarity, bent over my filing cabinet, her expression focused and intent. No ambiguity, no room for excuses. Beneath the photos, I laid out the text message printouts. Those had required different resources. A phone specialist named Marcus, who operated out of a small shop on Dale Mabry Highway. $200 and my phone in his possession for 3 hours. He'd mirrored Myrtle's messages from the family plan account, extracted them, printed them. The conversations with Jennifer Chen, college roommate, apparently still close confidant, ran across 4 pages. Dated discussions spanning 6 months. The old man won't last much longer if we help things along. Once he's declared incompetent, everything transfers. Alfred won't fight it. He already thinks his father's losing it. Clinical, calculated, cold. I read them again in the darkness, my eyes having adjusted enough to make out the words. Each sentence was a punch to the gut, but I'd moved past shock into something harder, more useful, rage with a purpose, anger with direction. The final piece was my handwritten note, composed earlier that afternoon in careful block letters. You thought I wouldn't notice? Police are already on their way. WF. A lie about the police, for now. But the effect would be the same. Panic, fear, the desperate scramble of someone whose plan had collapsed. I placed the note on top of everything, my signature bold and unmistakable. Ward Ferguson, not the confused old man she'd been building, not the incompetent victim she'd been creating. The real me, sharp, aware, and ready to fight. Standing back, I pulled my phone from my pocket and photographed the drawer's contents. Evidence of my evidence. Insurance if something went wrong, if somehow this didn't work. The photo captured everything. The surveillance image, the text printouts, the note. I sent it to my email account with a timestamp. Digital backup, stored in the cloud where Myrtle couldn't reach it. Then I adjusted the drawer, leaving it open exactly 1 inch. Not enough to be obvious from across the room, but enough that someone searching, someone looking for those safe keys, would notice immediately. A detail that would draw her hand like gravity. I stepped back to the bed and lowered myself onto the mattress, springs creaking softly. The drawer sat there in the darkness, barely visible, packed with destruction. Now came the hardest part. Waiting. I lay back against the pillows, still fully clothed, phone clutched in my right hand. Upstairs, the television continued its background murmur, Myrtle and Alfred watching their show, waiting for the sedative to fully take effect, waiting for me to slip into the deep unconsciousness that would make me vulnerable. Except I wasn't unconscious. I was awake, just alert, and the trap was set. My heart hammered against my ribs in steady, hard beats. I counted them, tried to slow my breathing, tried to think through what came next. She'd come eventually. Had to. The safe keys were essential for whatever she had planned. Accessing accounts, documents, valuables. She'd wait until she thought I was deeply under, then she'd creep down here and search. And when she opened that drawer, I closed my eyes, not sleeping, just waiting in the darkness with the patience of a hunter who'd already positioned the snare and now had to trust it would hold. Outside my window, Tampa's night sounds filtered through. Distant traffic, a neighbor's dog barking, the rustle of palm fronds in the breeze. Normal sounds. An ordinary Thursday night in September. Except nothing about tonight was ordinary. I'd crossed a line earlier, poisoning Olive by proxy, using an innocent woman as my proof. That guilt still lived in my chest, heavy and permanent. But this, setting a trap for the woman who'd spent a year poisoning me, manipulating my son, isolating me from friends, building a case for my incompetence so she could steal everything I'd built, this felt like justice. The drawer sat there in the darkness, waiting, and so did I. The phone screen showed 8:47 when I placed the call. I kept my voice low, barely above a whisper, cupping my hand around the speaker. Tampa Police, non-emergency line. How can I help you? I need to speak with a detective. It's about an attempted poisoning. Tonight, in progress. A pause. Keyboard clicks. Transferring you now. 3 rings, 4. Then a male voice, professional but tired. Detective Griffin, what's the situation? I laid it out in economical sentences. The poisoning attempt at dinner, the surveillance footage, the text messages, the systematic isolation and manipulation, each fact a building block, constructing the case in real time. Mr. Ferguson, those are serious allegations. What kind of proof are we talking about? Photos of her doing it, surveillance footage of her searching my office, text messages planning it, I'm sending them now. My thumb moved across the screen, attaching files, hitting send. The phone made its soft whoosh sound, evidence transmitted across digital space, landing in Detective Griffin's inbox. Silence on the line while he reviewed. I imagined him scrolling through images, reading texts, his expression changing from skeptical to concerned. I'm looking at these now. Stay on the line. More keyboard sounds, a muttered conversation with someone in the background. Then Griffin's voice returned, sharper now. Mr. Ferguson, don't confront her. Don't do anything. We're obtaining a warrant. We'll be there in 40 minutes. Can you stay safe until then? I'm in my bedroom, doors closed. She thinks I'm drugged and sleeping. I'll stay here. Good. Keep this line open if you can. If anything changes, if you feel threatened, call 911 immediately. Understood. We're on our way. The call ended. My phone's clock read 8:53, 40 minutes. Maybe less, maybe more. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously, becoming something fluid and unreliable. I set the phone on my chest, feeling its weight, its warmth. Upstairs, the television continued, a chase scene from the sound of it. Sirens, shouting, dramatic music, life imitating art, imitating life. The minutes accumulated slowly. 8:59, 9:04, 9:11. Each one measured by my phone's digital display, each one an increment of tension building in my chest. At 9:17, I heard Myrtle laugh at something on the show. The sound filtered through the ceiling, casual and light, the laugh of someone whose evening was going exactly according to plan. My left hand rested on my chest, fingers spread across my sternum, feeling my heart's rapid percussion. I counted beats, an old technique from my early days running a furniture store when vendor negotiations went sideways and I needed to stay calm, count heartbeats, steady the breathing, maintain control. 68 beats per minute, too fast. I slowed my breathing, lengthening each inhale and exhale. 62 beats per minute, better. 9:23, 9:31, 9:46. At 10 o'clock, the television went silent. I froze, every muscle tensing. Footsteps crossed the ceiling above. Water ran in the upstairs bathroom, pipes singing in the walls. More footsteps. A door closing with a soft thump. The house settling into its nighttime rhythms. But tonight, those familiar sounds carried different weight. Each creak was a potential approach. Each settling noise could be a footstep on the stairs. By 10:15, silence had achieved near total dominance. The refrigerator's hum from the kitchen. The house's wooden frame adjusting to cooling temperatures. My own breathing, too loud in my ears. And underneath everything, the terrible stillness of anticipation. I rose from the bed, moving carefully, and crossed to the door, pressed my ear against the wood, listened, nothing. Back to the bed. Check the phone. 10:22. My mind wouldn't stay still even if my body could. It circled through the past year like a prosecutor reviewing evidence for closing arguments. The isolation had been gradual, friends from the social club stopping their invitations, Henry mentioning that Myrtle had said I was going through something and needed space, bridge games happening without me, poker nights I wasn't invited to. The control over finances came wrapped in helpfulness. Ward, let me handle the utility payments. You've got enough to worry about. Ward, I'll take care of the insurance renewal. No need for you to deal with all that paperwork. Each offer to help was really a transfer of power, a piece of my independence slipping away. The suggestions about medications. Ward, have you considered something for memory? My friend's father takes this supplement. Ward, the doctor mentioned these pills could help with focus. Building a narrative of decline, preparing witnesses, creating the story that would justify declaring me incompetent. Every kindness a knife, every gesture of concern a calculated cut. And I'd noticed too late. Or maybe I'd noticed just in time. 10:32. Detective Griffin should be close now. Maybe 10 minutes out. Maybe less. But Myrtle might move sooner. She'd waited this long for the sedative to fully take effect. Or what she believed was the sedative working on me. At some point, her impatience would override her caution. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to heighten other senses. Listening became my primary mode. Every tiny sound magnified in the darkness. The house creaked. An old sound, familiar. The settling of wooden joists and beams. My heart accelerated. 74 beats per minute. 80. I forced myself to breathe slowly. What would she do when she opened that drawer? The question played on repeat. Would she run? Would she destroy the evidence? Would she realize the police were coming or believe my bluff? Would she come for me? That last thought sent ice through my veins. I'd assumed she'd panic and flee. But what if panic made her dangerous? What if she decided the only solution was to finish what she'd started? My hand found my phone, thumb hovering over the emergency call button, just in case. 10:38. Somewhere in Tampa, Detective Griffin was driving through the night. Somewhere upstairs, Myrtle and Alfred lay in bed, one sleeping innocently, one perhaps plotting the next move. And here in my first-floor bedroom, I waited in the darkness with my trap set and my evidence documented and my heart pounding out the seconds until everything came crashing down. The drawer sat against the far wall, barely visible. I stared at its shadow shape, wondering if I had thought of everything, if my plan would work, if justice would finally arrive. Any moment now, any moment. The sound came at 11:16. A creak. The third step from the top of the stairs. The one I'd meant to fix for 2 years, but never got around to. That distinctive groan of old wood under weight. Every muscle in my body tensed. Then I forced relaxation, becoming dead weight against the mattress, arms loose, head tilted left, mouth slightly open. The picture of unconscious vulnerability. Footsteps crossed the hardwood hallway. Careful placement, heel to toe. Someone who knew which boards complained and which stayed silent. Myrtle had learned my house well during her time here. I regulated my breathing, in for 4 counts, hold for 2, out for 6. The rhythm of deep sleep, the cadence of sedation. Through my barely cracked eyelids, I watched my bedroom door. The hallway light created a faint glow around its edges. The door swung inward with agonizing slowness. 1 inch, 2 inches, 6. Her silhouette appeared in the doorframe, backlit by the dim hall light. She stood motionless, listening, watching for any sign of wakefulness. I kept my breathing steady. In, hold, out, in, hold, out. 30 seconds passed, maybe 40. She was testing me, making sure the sedative, the one she thought I'd consumed, had done its work. Finally, she entered. Myrtle glided across the floor with surprising grace. Her phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, a narrow beam that swept past my bed and settled on the dresser. My heart hammered so hard I was certain she'd hear it, but I maintained the breathing pattern, in for 4, out for 6, counting silently, mechanically, while adrenaline screamed through my veins. She reached the dresser. Her flashlight beam found the slightly open drawer. I watched through the narrow slits of my eyelids, my angle giving me a clear view of her profile. She wore a burgundy bathrobe over pajamas. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. Her face carried an expression of focused intensity. Her free hand reached for the drawer handle, hesitated, reached again. The drawer slid open. The flashlight beam angled downward, illuminating the contents. I saw the exact moment comprehension hit her. Her body jerked backward as if electrocuted. Her mouth fell open. The phone in her hand trembled, making the light beam shake. She leaned in again, needing to confirm what she was seeing, needing it to be wrong, to be a nightmare, to be anything except real. Her fingers touched the photographs with the tentative horror of someone reaching into fire. She lifted them out, along with the text message printouts. The note fluttered to the floor. "Should be completely out by now," she whispered to herself, voice barely audible. 40 minutes minimum. Just grab the keys and go." But there were no keys, just evidence, just proof, just the documentation of every crime she'd committed. She read my note from where it had fallen. Her lips moved, forming the words, "You thought I wouldn't notice? Police are already—" She couldn't finish, couldn't bring herself to say it aloud. "No." Her whisper gained volume. "No, no, no." He couldn't know. He drank it. I watched him drink it. Denial wrestling with reality. Logic fracturing under the weight of impossibility. I lay perfectly still, watching her face cycle through emotions like a slideshow. Confusion, disbelief, horror, calculation, fear. There it is, I thought. The mask falls. Not the concerned daughter-in-law now. Just a thief caught with her hand in the safe. Her eyes darted to the bed, to me, checking if I was still unconscious. I kept my breathing steady. The performance of my life. She turned back to the evidence in her hands, reading the text messages more carefully now. Each line drove the knife deeper. I could see it in the way her shoulders hunched, the way her head shook in small, involuntary denials. "This isn't happening," she gasped. "Delete the files, burn the photos, fix this, fix this." Her panic was fragmenting her thoughts, breaking them into desperate commands to herself. Then she made her decision. She spun toward the door, the photographs and printouts clutched against her chest like a shield. Her bathrobe swirled around her legs. Her phone's flashlight beams swept wild arcs across the walls. She was running. I counted to 3, gave her just enough rope, let her think escape was possible. Then I opened my eyes fully, swung my legs off the bed, and stood. My knees protested. 64 years of living made sudden movements more complex than they used to be. But I was upright and moving before she reached the hallway. I flipped on my bedside lamp. Light flooded the room. Myrtle was already at the stairs, one hand on the banister, starting her ascent. Time to end this. I walked to my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. My voice came out calm, almost conversational, the tone of someone asking about the weather. "Where are you going, Myrtle?" She froze. 5th step up, her back to me, body rigid. The photographs trembled in her grip. I waited. Let the silence build. Let her understand that running wouldn't work, that the trap had already closed, that every move she made now was just another piece of evidence. She turned slowly, facing me. Her expression tried for confusion, for concern, but couldn't hide the terror underneath. She started, stopped, started again. I heard you moving around. I wanted to check if you were feeling all right." The lie came out weak, unconvincing. Her usual smooth manipulation had abandoned her. I smiled. No warmth in it, just acknowledgement of her effort. With sedatives in my juice, each word precise, clean, facts laid out like evidence in a courtroom. That kind of checking, her face drained of color. Even in the dim hallway light, I could see her go pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and that's when the commotion upstairs began. Myrtle's foot caught her bathrobe hem on the 5th step. She pitched forward with a small cry, catching herself on the banister. Her phone flew from her hand, tumbling down the wooden steps in a series of hard cracks. It landed at the bottom, its flashlight spinning wild shadows across the walls before the screen went dark. Cracked probably. Maybe destroyed. I stood in the hallway, fully dressed, the same clothes from dinner, not pajamas, and watched her struggle for balance. Watched her realize that every assumption she'd made tonight was wrong. Behind her, at the top of the stairs, a door opened. "What's going on?" Alfred's voice thick with sleep and confusion. "Myrtle? Dad?" He appeared in the upstairs hallway wearing boxers and an old Tampa Bay Rays t-shirt. His hair stood up at odd angles. He squinted against the light, trying to make sense of the scene below. His wife halfway down the stairs clutching papers. His father standing alert and dressed in the first-floor hallway. "Alfred, go back to bed." Myrtle's voice had gained a sharp edge. "Everything's fine." "Doesn't look fine." Alfred descended 3 steps, hand extended toward his wife in automatic protection. But he stopped when he got a clear view of her face, my face, the photographs in her grip. Something here didn't match the story he'd been told about his father's declining mental state. I picked up Myrtle's phone from where it had landed near my feet. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks but still glowing faintly. I held it out toward her without moving closer. "You dropped this." She stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. "Dad, what's happening?" Alfred was fully awake now, alert enough to sense the undercurrents. "Why are you dressed? Why is Myrtle—" "Your wife put sedatives in my orange juice tonight," I said, keeping my voice level, conversational. "During dinner, while your grandfather-in-law was telling his fishing story." The words hung in the air like smoke. Alfred looked at Myrtle, back to me, back to Myrtle. Dad, that's insane." "Is it?" I gestured to the photographs in Myrtle's hands. "Ask her what she's holding." Myrtle's fingers tightened on the papers, crumpling the edges. Her face cycled through expressions: calculation, panic, decision. Then she made her play. "He's lost his mind." Her voice rose to a shout, sudden and sharp. "I've been telling you for months, Alfred. He's getting worse. Now he's accusing me of poisoning him. Of all the paranoid, delusional—" "There are photographs," I interrupted quietly. "Surveillance footage of you searching my study. Text messages with Jennifer Chen discussing how to help things along and get me declared incompetent." Alfred's face went slack. "Dad, that sounds—" "Alfred, tell him he's wrong!" Myrtle was shouting now, desperation disguised as indignation. "Tell him he's confused. He needs help. We've been trying to help him." She was good, even cornered, even caught. She was making her play. Gaslight the victim. Make the accuser seem delusional. Force the son to choose between wife and father. Alfred stood frozen on the stairs, caught between 2 people he trusted, unable to reconcile what he was hearing. And then the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. Everyone froze. The doorbell rang again, followed immediately by heavy fist-on-wood pounding. Authoritative. Official. "Tampa police, open the door." The voice carried the unmistakable weight of law enforcement. No room for negotiation. Myrtle's face went from pale to gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Alfred gripped the banister, knuckles white. "Police? Dad, what did you—" "I called them." I walked toward the front door, moving past the stairs where Myrtle stood trapped, unable to ascend or descend without passing me. "Around 9 o'clock, sent them the evidence. They've been obtaining a warrant." "Evidence of what?" Alfred's voice cracked. "Dad, this is attempted poisoning, fraud, conspiracy." I reached the door but didn't open it yet, turned back to look at Myrtle. "Among other things, probably. I'm not a lawyer. The detectives can explain it better." More pounding on the door. "Tampa police, we have a warrant. Open the door now." Myrtle finally found her voice. "Alfred, don't let him do this. He's confused. He's not thinking clearly. We need to get him to a doctor, not—" "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," I said. "Clearer than I have in months, actually. Turns out not being poisoned helps with mental acuity." I looked at my son, really looked at him, saw the confusion, the fear, the desperate hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. "I'm sorry you have to see this, Alfred. I'm sorry it came to this. But your wife has been drugging me for months, isolating me, building a case to have me declared incompetent so she could take control of my assets." I paused. "Our assets, everything I built, everything I planned to leave you." "She wouldn't," Alfred started, but his voice had no conviction. Because somewhere deep down, past the denial, past the loyalty, he was starting to see it, the pieces clicking together, the strange suggestions about my medications, the way she'd encouraged distance between us, the insistence that I was declining when I felt fine. The pounding came again. "Final warning, open this door." I turned to the door, put my hand on the knob. looked back one last time at Myrtle, frozen on the stairs with the evidence of her crimes clutched in her trembling hands. "You know what the funny thing is?" I asked. "If you just waited, you would have gotten everything eventually. I'm 64. Statistically, I've got maybe 20 years left, probably less. But you couldn't wait, could you? Had to speed things along." I turned the deadbolt. The lock clicked open. "Now you'll have plenty of time, just not the way you planned." I opened the door. Detective Marcus Griffin stood on my porch, badge held up, 2 uniformed officers flanking him. Behind them, a patrol car's lights painted red and blue across my lawn. "Mr. Ferguson," Griffin's voice was professional, controlled. "I'm Detective Griffin. We spoke earlier. Come in, Detective." I stepped aside, gesturing to the tableau in my hallway. Myrtle on the stairs, photographs in hand. Alfred above her, still processing. The domestic scene transformed into crime scene. Griffin's eyes took it all in with practiced assessment. He stepped through the doorway, officers following. "Mrs. Myrtle Ferguson," his gaze fixed on Myrtle. "I need you to come down here, please. We have questions about some concerning evidence." The trap had closed, justice had arrived, and I stood in my doorway watching my daughter-in-law's face as she realized there was nowhere left to run. Detective Griffin stepped across my threshold, badge clipped to his belt, 2 uniformed officers flanking him. The first officer was a woman, nameplate reading Chen, her hand resting near her duty belt with practiced casualness. The second was younger, maybe 30, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Mr. Ferguson?" Griffin's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many domestic situations turn dark. "I'm Detective Marcus Griffin. We spoke earlier. Is this the individual you reported?" He gestured toward Myrtle, still frozen on the stairs, photographs clutched against her chest. She didn't wait for my answer, didn't wait for anything. Her survival instinct overrode rational thought. She pivoted and ran, not down toward us. That path was blocked. She bolted up the stairs, past a stunned Alfred, heading for the upper hallway, for the kitchen that connected to the back door, for escape. "Ma'am, stop!" Officer Chen moved immediately, but Myrtle was already disappearing around the corner. I heard her footsteps pounding overhead, heard the kitchen door crash open. Then silence. Then Myrtle's voice, high and panicked. "Get out of my way!" Officer Chen had circled the house. I realized it immediately. Standard procedure. Griffin at the front, Chen at the back. No escape routes. Chen's voice filtered down from upstairs, calm and authoritative. "Ma'am, please stay where you are. Come back inside." Footsteps again, slower now, defeated. Myrtle descended the stairs with Officer Chen behind her. Her face had gone from gray to ashen. The photographs were gone. She'd dropped them somewhere in her flight. Griffin pulled a folded document from his jacket. "Mrs. Myrtle Ferguson, I have a warrant to search these premises in connection with suspected attempted poisoning and attempted theft." He read key phrases aloud, each one landing like a hammer blow. "Authorization to search and seize evidence related to said crimes." Alfred descended the stairs behind them, moving like a sleepwalker. Each word from Griffin drove him deeper into incomprehension. "Dad?" His voice barely qualified as a whisper. "What's happening?" "Your wife poisoned my drink tonight," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The police are here to arrest her." "This is insane!" Myrtle found her voice suddenly, high and sharp. "He's setting me up. He switched the glasses himself. He's been unstable for months. Ask Alfred." Griffin's expression didn't change. "Mrs. Ferguson, we'll get your statement shortly. Right now, I need to see the evidence Mr. Ferguson mentioned." I walked to my study, the officers following. From my desk drawer, I retrieved the plastic bag containing the small packet I'd excavated from the trash during the chaos after the Stones left. The evidence I'd staged, prepared, protected. "This is the packet she used. You'll find her fingerprints on it. Inside is zolpidem, a sedative." I laid out the surveillance photographs next. Myrtle in my study, caught in infrared clarity, rifling through my filing cabinet. Then the printed text messages. 6 pages of conversation with Jennifer Chen, methodically planning my incompetence, my decline, the transfer of my assets. Griffin photographed each piece of evidence before collecting it, building his chain of custody, making this case courtroom ready. "I'll need to fingerprint Mrs. Ferguson," he said, "and test the contents of this packet." Myrtle backed toward the wall. "I'm not giving you anything without a lawyer." "That's your right," Griffin agreed. "But the warrant authorizes us to collect evidence regardless of your cooperation. Officer Rodriguez, the field kit." The younger officer produced a fingerprint collection kit. Myrtle tried to pull away when he reached for her hand, but Chen steadied her with a firm grip on her elbow. "Ma'am, you can cooperate, or we can do this at the station. Your choice." Myrtle's hands trembled as Rodriguez pressed her fingers to the ink pad, then to the card. One finger at a time. Thumb, index, middle, ring, pinky. Professional, methodical, irreversible. Griffin compared the prints to those on the packet using a portable magnifier. His expression shifted from neutral to grim. "Match," he said quietly. "Rodriguez, test the powder." A field test kit came out. A small amount of white powder went onto a reagent strip. The strip turned bright, unmistakable blue. "Positive for zolpidem," Rodriguez confirmed. Alfred sank onto the bottom stair, head in his hands. His shoulders shook. When he looked up at me, his eyes held questions I had no intention of answering tonight. I crossed to the kitchen and returned with the glass that had held the juice. Olive's glass, the one that had contained the sedative meant for me. I'd preserved it exactly where I'd left it on the counter. "Detective, this is what Olive Stone drank. The glass meant for me. You'll want to test it." Griffin's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Stone consumed this?" "Yes. She's probably at home by now, wondering why she felt so exhausted tonight. Or maybe already at the hospital if Herbert took her there when her symptoms worsened. We'll need to check on her immediately." Griffin pulled out his phone, stepped away, made a quick call. His voice was too low to hear, but I caught fragments. "Olive Stone, sedative, Tampa General." He returned, his expression darker. "Paramedics transported Mrs. Stone to Tampa General 40 minutes ago. Severe drowsiness, slurred speech, difficulty staying conscious. Her husband told them she'd only had dinner and juice." "She had my juice," I said, "which contained the sedative Myrtle meant for me." Myrtle's face drained of its last remaining color. "That wasn't supposed to, she wasn't—" She stopped, realized she'd just admitted it. Griffin turned to her fully. "Myrtle Stone Ferguson, you're under arrest on suspicion of attempted poisoning and attempted theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" Myrtle's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Do you understand these rights?" Griffin repeated. "I want a lawyer," she whispered. "Noted." Griffin nodded to Chen. "Cuff her." The metallic click of handcuffs closing around Myrtle's wrists was the sound of justice actualized. Her hands secured behind her back, photographs and packets and text messages all beyond her reach now. Alfred watched his wife being arrested, watched the officers guide her toward the door, watched his entire life collapse around him. "Dad," he started, stopped, started again. "You knew? All evening you knew?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the man who'd chosen his wife over his father without question, who'd accepted her narrative about my decline without investigating, who'd distanced himself because it was easier than confronting uncomfortable truths. "Would you have believed me?" I asked. "Or would you have sided with her?" He had no answer. The police car's lights painted red and blue across my lawn as they led Myrtle outside. Neighbors' lights began flickering on, curtains twitching, tomorrow's gossip being written in real time. I stood in my doorway and watched them place her in the back seat, Officer Chen's hand guiding her head as she ducked inside. The door closed, the lights stayed on. The car pulled away, and I felt my shoulders drop as tension I hadn't fully registered finally released. The immediate threat was gone. The digital clock on the police cruiser's dashboard showed 12:47 a.m. when they drove Myrtle away. September 6th. A new day. I closed my front door and turned to find Alfred still sitting on the bottom stair, staring at his hands. "I'm so sorry, Dad." His voice broke, tears streaming. "I should have listened. I should have trusted you. I don't know how to make this right." The words hung between us. An apology years too late. "You made your choice when you let her convince you I was losing my mind," I said, keeping my voice flat. No anger, but no comfort either. "When you believed her over me without question. That was your choice, Alfred, and choices have consequences. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I'll fix this. I'll testify for you. Whatever you need. I don't need anything from you. The truth of it settled in my chest, heavy but clear. The evidence speaks for itself. Your testimony won't change what happened. He stood, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Can I stay here tonight? I don't have anywhere else. The guest room is available. He nodded, climbing the stairs with the gait of a much older man. I heard his footsteps overhead, the guest room door closing. I sat in my living room chair and waited for dawn. Morning brought Detective Griffin's call at 7:30. Olive Stone was stable at Tampa General. They'd pumped her stomach, administered activated charcoal, kept her under observation. She'd recover fully within 24 hours. Her husband wants to speak with you, Griffin said. Should I give him your number? Yes. Herbert called at 8:15. His voice was thick, raw. Ward, I don't know if what you did was right, but you saved Olive's life. The doctors said another hour without treatment. He paused, collecting himself. I'm grateful. I'm also heartbroken my daughter could do this. I'm sorry you had to learn this way, Herbert. Are you? Sorry, I mean. I considered the question. I'm sorry Olive got hurt. I'm not sorry Myrtle's facing consequences. Fair enough. A long exhale. Fair enough. At 9 o'clock, I drove to Tampa Police Headquarters on Franklin Street, a squat concrete building that had seen 40 years of crimes confessed and denied. Detective Griffin met me in the lobby, guided me to an interview room, recording device on the table, coffee in a foam cup. 3 hours of questions. I recounted everything, the dinner, the observation, the switch, the trap, every detail captured on tape, transformed from private nightmare into public record. My signature appeared on document after document, each page another piece of the case file for Florida Vu, Myrtle Stone Ferguson. At noon, Griffin drove me home. You'll need a lawyer for your protection and to understand the process. I'll handle it. I called Jessica Hart at 1 p.m. She'd been recommended by a business associate, sharp, experienced, specialized in criminal defense. We met at her office at 3. She spread case files across her conference table, Florida statutes, precedents, sentencing guidelines. First-degree attempted poisoning under Florida Statute 782.07 carries up to 15 years, she explained, pen moving across her legal pad. Attempted grand theft under 8-12-014, another 5 years if property value exceeds $20,000. Your estate is worth substantially more, so that charge will stick. What's realistic? The evidence is overwhelming. She'll likely accept a plea to avoid trial. Hart's pen paused. 8 to 10 years realistically. Possibly more if the judge is particularly harsh on elder abuse cases, which some are. She quoted her retainer, $5,000. I wrote the check without hesitation. By evening, I was back home. Alfred's car was still in the driveway. I found him in his old room, boxes stacked by the door, clothes packed, toiletries collected. His life extracted from the house where he'd grown up. We passed in the hallway, didn't speak. Too much truth between us now for casual words. His car pulled out of the driveway at 7:30, taillights fading into the September dusk. He didn't say goodbye. I walked through my house, quieter now, empty in a different way than it had been when filled with Myrtle's presence. The back patio door slid open under my hand. The evening air was warm, carrying the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's yard. I settled into the chair I'd bought 15 years ago, weathered wood, comfortable cushions, and watched the sunset paint the sky orange and red. A glass of iced tea sat on the small table beside me. Not juice, never juice again. I thought about triumph and victory. Thought about revenge and justice. The words felt similar, but weren't. Revenge was about inflicting pain. Justice was about restoring balance. I'd restored balance. Myrtle was in county jail, awaiting arraignment. Olive was recovering. Alfred was gone, dealing with his own consequences. And I sat in my backyard, watching the same sunset I'd watched thousands of times. But tonight, the colors seemed sharper, the air cleaner. Not revenge, I said aloud to no one. Justice. There's a difference. The sun touched the horizon. A perfect orange disk sinking into purple clouds. Somewhere in this city, Detective Griffin was filing reports. Jessica Hart was building my defense. Myrtle was sitting in a cell, finally understanding that actions had consequences. And I was here, 64 years old, 8 successful furniture stores across Florida, 2.8 million in assets I'd built over 40 years, a son who'd betrayed me, a daughter-in-law who'd tried to destroy me. But I'd survived, I'd fought back, I'd won. Tomorrow I'd return to work, visit my stores, check inventory, review sales figures, return to the life I'd built through 4 decades of effort. Tonight, I simply sat in the silence of my own home, a silence that was finally peaceful rather than oppressive. The sun disappeared below the horizon. Twilight spread across Tampa. Streetlights flickered on down my block. I raised my glass of iced tea. Not a toast, just hydration. No symbolism needed. I was free. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.